good morning to you, and thanks for joining us. I'm Alicia Lewis. Pope Francis, the beloved pontiff who reshaped the Catholic Church, has died. He was 88 years old. And here's a look from the Vatican this morning, where people have already started gathering to honor Francis's life. His death coming after years of illness, the most recent just a few months ago when he was hospitalized for several weeks battling double pneumonia. And we learned this morning that the St. Paul Cathedral, a noon mass, is the first of the traditional 9 masses offered for the repose of his soul. In a long statement this morning, Archbishop Bernard Hepta says, quote, "I will always be grateful to Pope Francis for assigning me to serve as the Archbishop of St. Paul in Minneapolis. I have fond memories this day of all the times that he assured me of his prayers for the Archdiocese." And while he was sick, very recently the Pope was dedicated to his service of the Church, holding his final Easter Mass just yesterday. Right now, reaction, of course, pouring in from around the world, including a Cardinal, Timothy Dolan from New York.
He could barely raise his hand yesterday, did you see? He could barely speak. He couldn't do much, but what he was, as a child of God, created in God's image and likeness, destined for all eternity, given the high office of the successor of Peter, what he was so much more important than what he could do. All right? He did a lot, believe me, but in those final months, I think that's when he had the most eloquent pulpit ever.
I'm back here at home. There are plans to honor Pope Francis in a big way this week, as the highest ranking members in the Catholic Church have a big job now next of picking the next pope. Audrey Russo's live at the Basilica of St. Mary with more.
There's no Mass here today at the Basilica of St. Mary following the busy Easter holiday, but once Mass does resume tomorrow, no doubt there will be a different tone as local parishioners wonder who the next pope will be. This is a day Catholics have been bracing for since the 88-year-old Pope Francis first got sick. The College of Cardinals, a body of bishops from around the world, must elect a new pope. A candidate has to get 2/3 majority of the vote, otherwise the ballots are burned with a chemical to produce black smoke. Once a candidate reaches that margin, that is when we see the white smoke signaling a new pope has been chosen. In February, we spoke to a former Vatican journalist based in Minneapolis. He said the philosophical direction of the next pope will be a big conversation among Catholics.
The question is what comes after Pope Francis, whether that's soon or later. There will be a pope who follows Francis. And the question is, are the cardinals going to turn to somebody that reflects his pastoral objectives, or are they going to step back?
And as the mourning of Pope Francis continues today, we've reached out to the Basilica of St. Mary for more information on how they plan to memorialize the late pontiff. They did already tweet out a link to prayer for local parishioners to follow. Back to you.
Audrey, thank you. Now, Pope Francis was one of the most visible men in the world and rattled the Catholic Church with reforms. NBC's Mark Barker takes a closer look at Francis's life and his papacy.
Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio
Buonasera.
was elected Pope when Pope Benedict abruptly resigned in 2013. Bergoglio chose the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, known for his poverty and humility. Francis was the first pope to come from Latin America and the first to take the name Francis. In his opening appearance as pope, he asked that people pray for him. Francis became the leader of an estimated 1.2 billion Roman Catholics at a time of a number of conflicts for the church: a sex abuse scandal, a financial scandal in the Vatican Bank, and conflicts over the issues of abortion, homosexuality, and the role of women in the church. Within days of beginning his papacy, Francis made choices that revealed he would be a different kind of pope. He shunned the regal garments and trappings of previous popes, he paid his own hotel bill in person, and he chose to live in a modest apartment instead of the lavish papal residence. It was clear from the start that Francis loved interacting. He kissed children, wore hats from the crowd, and posed for pictures.
Don't get tired of bringing the mercy of the Father to the poor, the sick, the abandoned.
Within the first year of his papacy, he apologized to victims of sexual abuse by priests and set up a committee that included lay people to investigate sex crimes by priests. The wave of sexual abuse scandals within the church proved to be the greatest crisis of Francis' tenure. In 2015, he was criticized for supporting a Chilean bishop who was accused of covering up sex crimes against minors. Francis later admitted mishandling the situation and asked for forgiveness. Another abuse bombshell rocked the Catholic Church in 2018. A scathing grand jury report detailed decades of sexual abuses by priests in Pennsylvania.
Holy Father knows this is very serious. Holy Father knows this can shake the faith of the people in the pews.
The Vatican condemned the abuse as criminally and morally reprehensible and said Pope Francis was on the side of the victims. Through it all, Francis maintained his reputation as a reformer. He set up a hand-picked committee of 8 cardinals to discuss reforming the Vatican bureaucracy. He made headlines for his apparent acceptance of homosexuality and for warning about the dangers of climate change. Pope Francis also played a key role in the talks to restore full diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba in 2014. He also spoke frequently about the importance of women in the Catholic Church and changed the Church's stance on the death penalty, declaring it unacceptable in all cases. Having had part of one lung removed as a young man, Francis had long battled health problems, especially bouts of acute bronchitis in winter. In recent years, he had been using a wheelchair, walker, or cane when moving around his apartment. Mark Barker, NBC News.
Other news headlines we're following this morning. Right now, we're learning more about a plane crash that killed 4 people from western Wisconsin over the weekend. The plane went down Saturday morning in Illinois, crashing in a town about 200 miles south of Chicago. The victims, Courtney and Michael Morrow, Remy Rundle, and Ross Nelson, range in age from 36 to 48 years old. Although it's still not clear what exactly led to the crash, the National Transportation Safety Board says that the plane hit multiple power lines before crashing into a field. Local authorities and the National Transportation Safety Board are investigating. A report from the NTSB in the coming weeks will give us a better idea of what exactly happened. This morning, classes will resume at Florida State University 4 days after a deadly shooting there on campus. That shooting killed 2 people and injured 6 others. Over the weekend, the university's president shared a message with students and made it clear that they have the option to take classes remotely if they feel they cannot return to campus yet.
Please know that we are all here for you. You are not alone.
Meanwhile, some students say it will be hard for them to return to classes on campus.
I don't feel safe right now being on campus. I don't know how we're going to do it, but you know, there's a reason that Florida State is unconquered. We're stronger together. We will always move forward, whatever that looks like.
2 campus employees died in the shooting. 45-year-old Tiro Chapa and 57-year-old Robert Morales. Investigators say that they're still trying to determine why the 20-year-old gunman, a Florida State student, opened fire. Well, the Trump administration's face-off with the courts over deportations is heating up. Over the weekend, the Supreme Court ordering the administration not to deport a group of Venezuelan migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. And it all comes as a new controversy emerging involving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and a second Signal chat group. NBC's Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Hi there. The new Supreme Court action puts the president's deportation plans on pause, ratcheting up a legal test, reaching all the way up to the nation's highest court.
And we're getting them out.
President Trump's immigration policy again colliding with the courts after the Supreme Court paused the deportations of another group of Venezuelan migrants and alleged gang members. Lawyers representing the men say they're being denied hearings to argue their case, something the High Court previously ruled was required to deport under the Wartime Alien Enemies Act, which the administration wants to resume using, asking the justices to lift their hold.
I'm not arguing right here that nobody should get due process. I'm just saying there's a different process under the Alien Enemies Act.
2 conservative justices dissented with the court's pause, calling it unprecedented and legally questionable. President Trump again slamming the federal courts for derailing his immigration actions to stop what he called a sinister attack on our nation. Critics like Senator Chris Van Hollen, who visited, mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador, whose release the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate, accusing the president of focusing on gang allegations over due process.
If you deny the constitutional rights of one man, you threaten the constitutional rights for everybody.
Meanwhile, the administration facing new controversy over Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth sharing sensitive information ahead of U.S. military operations in Yemen last month in another Signal group chat, including his wife, his brother, and personal lawyer. They both hold Pentagon jobs. That's all according to two sources with knowledge of the matter. It was first reported by the New York Times. The White House saying there was no wrongdoing and no classified information shared. The Defense Department's acting inspector general is looking into the first Signal chat when a journalist was accidentally added to high-ranking Trump officials' sensitive military discussions on Yemen. The ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee is asking that this new reporting be added to that investigation. In Washington, I'm Alice Barr. Back to you.
As you head back from your lunch break today, a former state senator will appear in federal court in St. Paul for an arraignment. Justin Eichhorn was released from prison last month and is staying at a halfway house after being accused of soliciting a minor for sex. A special election to fill his seat in District 6 will happen next Tuesday. Over to the Wild Stanley Cup playoffs run, beginning with an unfortunate loss in Vegas overnight. The Golden Knights taking Game 1 of the best-of-7 series 4-2. They're facing off for Game 2 tomorrow night, 10 o'clock in Vegas. Game 3 will be at the X on Thursday. And hey, be sure to stick with us. More news and weather coming up after the break.